October in Blackwater, Oregon always smelled the same. Wet pine bark, salty ocean foam, and rotting seaweed. It was one of those sleepy, gray towns on the Pacific Northwest coast where the sun was considered a rare guest and locals preferred strong coffee and silence. Arthur Pendleton had moved here a year ago, shortly after his wife Sarah died of an aneurysm. Death took her quickly, like a thief snatching a purse on the run. Arthur needed a place to hide from the sympathetic looks of his friends in Seattle. Blackwater was perfect. He worked for Geospace, a subcontracting company that updated digital maps for major navigation systems. His job was monotonous, but soothing. Every day, Arthur got into a nondescript gray SUV equipped with a massive spherical camera and LiDAR on the roof, and slowly, street by street, scanned the town. The camera took 360-degree panoramic shots, and the lasers created a precise three-dimensional model of the space.
In the evening, he would return to his rented wooden house on the outskirts, brew a cup of tea, upload terabytes of raw data to the server, and manually correct the algorithm's errors on his monitor. His life had become geometry. The right angles of intersections, the straight lines of road markings, the exact coordinates of latitude and longitude. In Arthur's world, everything had its exact place. Until Tuesday evening, October 14th. Rain drummed against the study window. Arthur sat in his chair, wrapped in an old blanket, monotonously clicking his mouse. The GeoMapper interface glowed on the screen. He was reviewing panoramas shot that morning in the town's historic district. Driving down Elm Street, an old road lined with gloomy Victorian mansions, the camera had captured a normal landscape. There was Mrs. Gallagher's house with its peeling paint. There was the blank brick wall of the abandoned textile factory. There was the next house. Arthur blinked, took a sip of cold tea, and scrolled the mouse wheel, zooming in on the image. Something was wrong. Between the factory's brick wall and the neighboring house on the panorama, a narrow alleyway gaped open. An alley paved with black cobblestones, trailing off into impenetrable shadow. But Arthur knew for a fact there was no alley there. He had driven past it dozens of times. The factory abutted the residential house. No gap, no alley. Frame stitching glitch, Arthur muttered into the empty room. He opened the LiDAR layer, the laser scan of the space. While a photograph could be deceiving due to a lens flare, the laser, bouncing off physical objects, never lied. The point cloud loaded. Arthur's heart skipped a beat. The laser hadn't just seen the alley, it had recorded its depth. But the data was insane. Judging by the numbers in the corner of the screen, this narrow passage went 3 miles deep. 3 miles straight through the town. That was physically impossible. After 200 feet, the alley should have punched right through City Hall and exited into the bay. Moreover, the geometry of the alley broke the eyes. The lines of the walls on the screen didn't converge in perspective. They seemed turned inside out, as if Arthur were looking at an M.C. Escher optical illusion. When he tried to focus on the furthest point of the alley, a sudden ache pierced his temples, and a wave of mild nausea rose in his throat. He abruptly closed the program. A heavy silence hung in the room, broken only by the sound of the rain and the humming of the computer processor. It's just a software bug. A matrix glitch, he thought, chuckling nervously. But for some reason, his palms were sweating. He looked at the clock, 11:40 p.m. Arthur could have gone to bed. He could have sent a bug report to the developers in California. But a quiet, insidious voice in his head, the voice that always appeared in his loneliest hours, whispered, "What if something is actually there?" He put on a yellow raincoat, grabbed a heavy-duty LED flashlight, and stepped out into the slushy night. Elm Street was a 15-minute walk away. The streets of Blackwater were absolutely empty. The yellow cones of streetlights carved through the veil of drizzling rain. The ocean breathed heavily and rhythmically nearby, crashing waves against the breakwaters. Approaching the old factory building, Arthur stopped. He shined the flashlight beam onto the wall. Nothing. A blank, wet brick wall, flush against the foundation of the neighboring house. No alley, no black cobblestones. Arthur exhaled with relief. The tension left his shoulders. He really was starting to lose his mind, believing a computer glitch. He stepped right up to the wall, running his hand over the cold, rough brick to finally confirm the reality of the barrier. But his hand met no resistance. His fingers passed through the brick as if through thick, freezing fog. Arthur recoiled with a stifled cry. The flashlight slipped from his other hand and rolled across the wet asphalt, illuminating a puddle. He stood, breathing heavily, staring at the wall. It looked absolutely solid. Tufts of wet moss grew on it, but where his hand had touched it, the air rippled faintly, like a mirage over hot asphalt in the summer. This is impossible, his brain insisted. This violates the laws of physics. But wasn't this exactly what he had secretly wished for since Sarah passed away? That the laws of reality weren't absolute? That there was something beyond our comprehensible world? Arthur bent down and picked up the flashlight. He took a deep breath, squeezed his eyes shut, and stepped right through the brick wall. The sensation was like diving into an ice hole. The smell of rain and the ocean vanished instantly. It was replaced by the scent of dry dust, ozone, and something unbearably ancient. The smell of copper and scorched stone. Arthur opened his eyes. He was standing at the beginning of a narrow alley, paved with smooth black stone that looked like obsidian. Behind him, where the exit to Elm Street should have been, hung an impenetrable gray veil. Ahead, the alley plunged into darkness. There was no rain here. There were no sounds of the town. The silence was so absolute that Arthur could hear the low hum of blood pushing through his veins. He raised the flashlight. The beam of light seemed to weaken, bogging down in the darkness, unable to penetrate further than a few dozen yards. The walls of the buildings on either side of the alley didn't resemble Blackwater's architecture. They were monolithic blocks of gray, porous material, devoid of windows and doors. And they went up, high up. Arthur tilted his head back and felt a sharp stab of vertigo. The buildings didn't end with roofs.
They reached into the heavens at unnatural angles, curving inward, looming over him like the ribs of a giant dead animal. The sky. There was no sky. There was only an expanse the color of dried blood, in which massive pale spheres rotated slowly, as if in thick syrup. They didn't emit light, they absorbed it. "My God," Arthur whispered. His voice sounded muffled, as if he were in a padded room. He wanted to turn around. He wanted to throw himself back into the gray veil, into the safety of the wet Oregon asphalt. But his legs moved on their own. Deep inside him, an animalistic, hypnotic curiosity had awakened. The pull of a moth to a flame. He walked forward across the black stones. With every step, the geometry of the space distorted more and more. The straight lines of the walls began to warp. Arthur felt like he was walking on a flat surface, but his vestibular system screamed that he was falling down a spiral. The corners of the buildings were simultaneously acute and obtuse. Space was turning inside out, disobeying the laws of a three-dimensional world. Arthur's nose began to bleed. A hot drop fell onto the yellow sleeve of his raincoat. Then he heard the sound. It started as a low-frequency vibration echoing in the soles of his boots. Then it grew into a hum. The sound wasn't like machinery or wind. It was breathing. The slow, raspy, wet breathing of something unimaginably massive. Ahead, at the edge of the flashlight's beam, the street began to widen, opening into a cyclopean plaza. Arthur stepped out onto it and froze, paralyzed by a primal, blood-chilling terror. The plaza was paved with slabs carved with symbols that writhed when Arthur tried to focus his eyes on them. And in the center of the plaza, towering over the distorted buildings, was something. Arthur's brain refused to interpret what he was seeing. It was visual noise, a kaleidoscope of pulsating flesh, black stone, and blinding non-light. A mass composed of geometry that should not exist. Within it, he could make out fractal tentacles folding into impossible knots, and billions of eyes opening and closing to the rhythm of that deep breathing. The entity wasn't moving, it was sleeping. But even its slumber deformed the fabric of reality around it. Arthur realized with absolute, bone-chilling clarity, this place was not a parallel world or an illusion. This was the true reality, the underside of the universe. And Earth, Blackwater, the solar system, all of it was merely a razor-thin, fragile film of mold on the surface of this chthonic dream. Suddenly, the entity's breathing stopped. The humming ceased. The mass of fractal flesh in the center of the plaza slowly began to shift. One of the giant appendages, resembling a column of black glass and sinew, lazily rolled over. At that moment, one of the billions of eyes on the surface of the entity opened. It was the size of a moon. The iris shimmered with colors for which there were no names in human language. And that eye looked straight at Arthur Pendleton. The blow to his psyche was physical. Arthur collapsed to his knees, dropping the flashlight. His mind was torn apart, like a sheet of paper in hurricane winds. In an instant, knowledge poured into his head. He saw the birth of stars from rotting slime. He saw that humanity only existed because this entity was having a nightmare. He realized that sanity was a disease of space. And most terrifying of all, he realized that the entity had slept for billions of years, until the digital laser on the roof of Arthur's car scanned the membrane between worlds. The scan was a knock on the door, and now the master was awake. The scream that tore from Arthur's throat didn't belong to a human. It was the howl of a cornered, crushed animal, running purely on adrenaline. Driven by the instinct for self-preservation, he scrambled to his feet and ran. He didn't remember running across the black cobblestones. He didn't remember how the space compressed around him, trying to crush him, grind him to dust for his insolence. He only saw the gray veil ahead of him. He dove into it like a rescue hatch. Arthur tumbled out onto the wet asphalt of Elm Street, slamming his shoulder against a lamppost. Rain. Cold, normal Oregon rain lashed at his face. He lay on his back, greedily gulping air mixed with water. The blank brick wall of the factory towered over him, solid, impenetrable. He lay there for several minutes until his pulse slowed. "I got out," pounded in his temples. "I escaped." Sobbing from the shock, Arthur got to his feet. He was shaking. He needed to go home, take a sleeping pill, forget this as a nightmare brought on by stress and grief. He walked through the night streets of Blackwater, familiar, understandable houses, straight intersections. The geometry was fine. The world was fine. When he reached his house, he didn't take off his clothes. Soaking wet in his raincoat, he walked into his study. The GeoMapper program was still glowing on his computer screen. Arthur reached for the mouse to close everything and shut the computer down forever. But his eyes fell on the status bar in the bottom right corner of the screen. Server synchronization complete. Data integrated into the global map. Reality protocol update initiated. Reality protocols? What kind of nonsense was that? There had never been a system message like that in the program. Arthur looked at the map of Blackwater on the screen. Elm Street had changed. The alley he had seen on the panorama was now clearly drawn on the vector map. But that was only the beginning. Right before his eyes, the digital lines of the streets began to bend. The grid of city blocks writhed, forming spirals and non-Euclidean knots. The town's map was rebuilding itself, adapting to that horrifying geometry from the black dimension. The phone in his pocket vibrated. Then again, and again. They were automated notifications. GPS error. Route recalculated. New space found. Arthur slowly shifted his gaze from the monitor to the study window. The rain outside was no longer falling down. It hung suspended in the air like millions of glittering needles. The street in front of his house, always straight as an arrow, now arched upwards at an impossible angle, vanishing into a black sky where a giant, pale glow was slowly emerging through the clouds. Not the moon. The entity hadn't needed to break through the wall. There was no need. By digitizing the anomaly, saving it to servers, and integrating it into the global navigation system, humanity had rewritten the code of its own world. The software updated the map, and reality always follows the map. From deep within the earth, from beneath the foundation of Arthur's house, came a low, wet hum, the sound of a giant sigh. The walls of the study began to fold inward on themselves. The corner of the room ceased to be a right angle. It became acute, then obtuse, then turned into something that made blood spray from Arthur's eyes. He sat in his chair, watching the world fold itself into an origami of madness. He was no longer screaming. In his head, amidst the collapsing laws of physics and the erasing universe, only one thought rang out. It was here. And now it didn't need to hide in blind spots. We drew the road home for it ourselves. The window shattered, letting in the smell of ozone, dust, and an ancient, unimaginable dark. The computer screen blinked and went black.